Story 1. I learned tongue taste maps at school. Turns out it's complete nonsense. I have a feeling science knew it was nonsense for years, while schools kept pushing it for some reason. I knew it was nonsense when I was in grade whatever and could taste every flavor across my tongue. I actually think it might have been the first thing that truly taught me to be skeptical about the scientific world. I say keep teaching it, but modify the lesson to challenge the critical thinking skills of the students. Clarify at the end, and ensure you indicate that the map is BS. But allow them to understand that they can refute evidence and generate their own additional hypothesis that can be proven or rejected. Story 2. Once you get to high school, nobody will accept papers not written in cursive. Elementary teachers think high school is like signing up for basic military training. I swear. My grade 8 teacher told me that high school wouldn't let me use pencils, use the bathroom during class, fail me if I'm a minute late for class, not let me talk to my friends in the halls, etc. It's like they watched a Hollywood high school movie and thought it was real. Story 3. The Food Pyramid. Can you believe that having the Department of Agriculture create a diagram of what we eat was a bad idea? Can't imagine why portion sizes are huge from the Department of Agriculture. I always wonder what the CDC or FDA might have made instead. The irony is that after they got flack for having the Department of Agriculture make it, they went private to have the pyramid remade after about 10 years. And Kellogg's won that bid, subsequently increasing the amount of grain suggested to be eaten daily. Story 4. In pharmacy school around the turn of the century, we were taught that people in legitimate pain don't get addicted to opiates and opioids. Have you seen the show Painkillers on Netflix? It's so good and shows how they pushed opioids on the public like it was candy because it's not addictive. I actually remember when I broke my clavicle around the peak of it, and they gave me 120 pills of Vicodin with 5 refills. I remember only needing the first bottle for the actual pain. Story 5. Your permanent record will follow you into adulthood. Only time I found that record was used for college admittance. A really smart person had a bunch of red flags in his profile. He would talk back endlessly, have rejection letters stating his records were not clear enough to even apply there. He turned out fine. I think he's a lawyer in a big city. Turns out talking back and being argumentative in class as a kid sets the foundation to being a successful lawyer. Story 6. You won't always have a calculator on you, and you have much more than that now. You basically have an answer to any question on any test you've ever taken. Story 7. I once asked one of my elementary school teachers what a rainbow was, and she told me scientists hadn't figured it out. I walked around until my early 20s thinking that. Also, I think it was this same teacher who told me Columbus thought the earth was flat. They were training teachers in a different kind of way in the 70s and 80s. It's honestly one of the reasons I'm thankful for the internet, because depending on your teacher or an outdated encyclopedia for answers could be a real roll of the dice. Story 8. I remember being told that only Columbus thought the earth was round and literally everyone else in Europe thought it was flat. And that's why he couldn't get funding at first to explore, because everyone thought he was going to fall off the side of the earth. Turns out, that's so wrong, it's not even funny. Story 9. No one is going to wait for you to look up information in the real world. You have to know it. Has to be the most insane thing I have ever heard. It never made sense to me, even before everyone had the internet in their pocket. In one of my high school English classes, we were constantly writing essays without being allowed to consult the books we'd been assigned. This was to prepare us for the final state exam, in which we'd be given an essay prompt, which was to remain a mystery until they actually handed us the exam, and would not be allowed any outside material to bring with us. I always wondered, do they expect us to memorize every detail of every book we've ever read in order to write one essay for this one dumbass exam? Story 10. If you study well and have excellent grades, you will end up with a nice job and lots of money. I think part of it is career guidance, but I think an even larger part of it is the mentality that people can study whatever they want in college. Many people push the idea of just studying whatever your passion is. The reality is that societies often support a limited quantity of different types of work, and once you hit the limit, everyone else pushes down wages, more workers than jobs available, and fails to get jobs in their chosen professions. This is doubly impactful in job categories that were never really that high paying in the first place. Lots of people love the arts or sociology or philosophy, but those particular majors don't generally have the biggest influx of cash heading their way. Story 11. That I'd fail in life because I was not good at math. I always had a hard time with math and physics and chemistry. Turns out I am just not good with numbers, but succeeded with languages. I have a natural talent for languages. I am a translator and conference interpreter. I work with 5 languages. My math teacher told my mom I'd never amount to anything if I didn't master math. I was there, and her words scarred me for life. I have been terrified of failure ever since. Story 12. In the UK, there was an organization that sold seminars to schools that were supposed to teach kids about the type of learner they are, visual, auditory, or kinetic. They would turn up and spend a 2-hour assembly teaching the kids all about how some of them should record their notes so they would take them in better, or how they should write things out again and again if they were visual learners, etc. But it was basically all complete horseshit. Pseudoscience, like those Briggs-Myers personality tests. They made it up based on cursory readings of actual academic papers, then built a whole rigid system of rules and tips. The first clue was how they seemed to be able to sort people into their learning group with just 1 or 2 questions, when really something like that, if it was legit, would likely need a session with a psychologist to determine. The second clue was my physics teacher burying his head in his hands and grimacing the entire time. He was a published academic who started teaching in schools to ease into retirement. I asked him about it, and he said he begged the principal not to book them because he knew it was made up. The principal decided to do it anyway because all the other schools had already done it, and what harm could it do? Story 13. Not my lifetime, but my mom's sister was initially forced to write with her right hand, despite being left-handed. Since they went to Catholic school, it was taught as fact that being left-handed was of the devil. When my aunt started grade 1, my great-grandfather died a couple weeks into the school year and bequeathed some money to the church and school. The family would not give it to them unless my aunt was allowed to be left-handed. Amazingly enough, the priest, upon prayer and reflection, determined that being left-handed wasn't a problem anymore. Isn't that something? That's how my now 78-year-old aunt changed science at Blessed Sacrament when she was 5 years old. Story 14. Carrots are good for night vision. This was a lie the British used to explain how they could spot German bombers during World War II. The truth? That they had broken the German Enigma machine and were decoding secret messages was kept a secret for decades. The full story was not told until the 1990s. I consider the Enigma cover-up to be the best kept secret in human history. Story 15. Multiple teachers over the years told me the Nova didn't sell well in Hispanic countries because the manufacturer marketing execs didn't realize Nova means no-go story. It's a total urban legend, but this was back before anybody we knew had the internet. So people just blindly believed whatever they were told back then, including teachers. Not that people have stopped blindly believing things now, but at least you can Google stuff if it sounds made up now. Story 16. A little bit before my time, and most teachers already knew it was wrong, but it was still in my 3rd and 4th grade science books, since they were dated to when it was still in vogue in the 70s, even though we were told to mostly ignore it. Global cooling. I imagined massive ice ages by the time I was an adult, since I ignored my teachers and read the passages anyway. I was disappointed to find out how wrong it was. Story 17. I have a list of false claims. Condoms are completely useless, using a basketball going through a hoop as an example somehow. Also, birth control is a placebo, and anybody can spread deadly STDs, even if they don't have them yet. In science, we were taught that humans were cold-blooded. This was proven by having us hold our hands in ice water for 5 minutes, then having us try to close our hands quickly and write. Hooray for semi-rural Wisconsin. Story 18. If you get good grades, you will be successful in life. I know people who had straight A's and are struggling today. Meanwhile, the B and C students went the trade or military route and are successful today. Just a theory, but the A students burned themselves out in school and then floundered in their jobs or career. Not saying every A student, but enough to notice. My theory is that some A students are not so good socially, which matters as much in life as academics. A few people are good at both, of course, and people don't always have the same definition of success. Story 19. I asked my dad this one time because he is in his 70s, so things have changed a lot. He told me that when he was growing up, he was taught that most indigenous Americans were wiped out through ongoing wars and genocide during the westward expansion of the Europeans. This obviously happened, but the reality is that diseases such as measles, smallpox, etc. were responsible for the vast majority of the deaths. The diseases were carried by transmission well before Europeans arrived in the area, and were killing people before they even saw any Europeans. Ultimately, disease was responsible for 80 to 90% of indigenous deaths. Story 20. My dumb science teacher wins this one. High school science class in the 90s. I had a teacher that was full of himself. Never the wrong type of person. He said that our vision was only good for about 2 miles, and you couldn't see beyond that. He used the ocean as an example. He said when you watch a boat drive away from you, it disappears about 2 miles out because your vision is gone. He said our body has limitations, and our eyes are just one example. Everyone was mumbling, and people were looking out the window, and some speaking up, saying things like, "Yeah, it's true. I've seen ships just disappear and always wondered why." I started laughing, and he asked, "Mr. X, is there something so funny you need to share with the class?" I was a typical smart teen who talked back. I said, "Well, yeah. If our vision is shot at 2 miles, how the hell can we see the moon and stars? Or airplanes?" I was still laughing, then said, "The reason we can't see ships after a while is because of the curvature of the earth." He did not like me at all, and kicked me out for disrespecting him. We didn't have Google, so we couldn't have proof, but anyone with a brain should know that that was false. Story 21. Maybe not exactly disproven, but being exposed as a half-truth. I was told in school that we live in a performance-based society. The better you perform, the more success you'll have in your career, which is kind of by itself as a standalone thing, kind of false. Careers and jobs are always a business, and you don't get what you deserve, but only what you negotiate for. Better performance gives you more leverage in your negotiations, but by itself, it won't give you raises or better positions in your job. The first reaction of my boss seeing me become good at my job is usually that he gives me more work to do and more responsibility, but keeps me at the same wage to maximize his own profit. Story 22. I went to a Christian school and had to take a creation science class. They taught us that before the flood, the Earth had a super rich oxygen atmosphere. That's why dinosaurs were so big and why humans lived so long. The Earth had an ice crystal dome surrounding it, and it made music when the sun rose because the sun emitted radio signals. God did that because the universe sang his praises. I think they got that from an obscure verse of Psalms. I'm an atheist now, but at the time, I thought this was real. Looking back, I find it interesting. Imagine taking a class about the history of Middle-earth. You'd learn where hobbits and elves come from. Story 23. Stretching. It's a huge part of school sport and exercise. It's also done completely wrong. The stupid thing is that it's been known for decades, and elite sports, the army, etc., all do it differently. But for some reason at the school level, static stretching before exercising is widespread. Story 24. TLDR. Muscle damage doesn't cause muscle growth. Mechanical tension does. Muscle damage just tends to accompany mechanical tension. Muscle damage, microtears being the driver for muscle growth. It's still taught in some schools to this day, but the current literature supports mechanical tension as the primary, and perhaps only, driver of hypertrophy. In fact, muscle damage can be counterproductive. The idea that microtears lead to muscle growth is so widespread because, in order to induce mechanical tension, by resistance training, for example, lifting weights, some form of muscle damage is inevitable. Basically, correlation doesn't imply causation. This is a case of A causes B and C, so people thought B causes C. We have mechanoreceptors in our muscles that detect tension, and with sufficient tension stimulus will induce hypertrophy. When looking at muscle damage in isolation, we find that it doesn't help muscle growth, and in fact impairs it. For example, when you run a marathon, you will cause tons of muscle damage, and your legs will be extremely sore, but your muscles will not grow one bit, because you didn't induce sufficient tension to create a hypertrophic stimulus. And the more muscle damage you accrue, the more work your body has to do to heal it, simply to return to baseline. Hence the term junk volume. Once you have sufficiently stimulated a muscle, any more volume would be junk volume and provide marginally zero or negative benefits, since you are accruing unnecessary fatigue and damage without extra stimulus. Story 25. In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. Bullshit. I'm autistic. When I treat people like they're autistic, they get mad. Find people who treat you right, then return the favor. Don't waste time treating people nicely when they only take advantage of that kindness. Story 26. My wife and I had a policy to have our kids read the book Lies My History Teacher Told Me when they turned 13. On all 3 occasions, the school asked us to come in for a conference and asked us not to teach our kids a non-approved curriculum. Of course, we just smiled, got up, and left the meeting. Story 27. I have got a multitude. It was okay to run Mercury around in your hands. Pluto was a planet. Electricity only goes through wires. The food pyramid. You will not have a calculator at all times. You will have more opportunities than your parents. You will have a higher standard of living than your parents and more money to spend. Computers will not get rid of any jobs. The metric system will be the only system in the US in the future. There is no such thing as stagnant inflation. It cannot happen. The government is your friend. All police are out there to help you. Always carry a dime to make a phone call. We will be living on Mars by now. Government is here to serve the people. That is why they are called civil servants, to serve the civilians. Communism will fall in the world, and if we become friends with the Chinese, they will become democratic. Gays are perverts. If you work hard and save, you will become rich. You can be president if you try hard enough. You will be able to have a vacation home if you work hard enough. Circumcision is good for you and prevents all diseases. Sex is bad. God will punish you if you are bad. All criminals will be caught. The world will be safer for all in the future. Story 28. I learned that men had more heart attacks than women when in school. That is wrong. Since then, the belief now is that women are chronically underdiagnosed with heart attack, and they're unsure if the number might be equal or more, since the symptoms advertised often never show up in women. Ladies, look out for upper back pain, pain in the jaw, or either arm as a possible warning sign. Shortness of breath is the biggest indicator both with or without chest pain, and it seems more often than not, women will not experience unusual chest pain. Story 29. Australia was discovered by Captain Cook. Australia was settled lawfully because of terra nullius, basically saying aboriginals were primitive when they were not. Colonization was peaceful, that there was no slavery in Australia. There is a huge amount of misinformation regarding aboriginals in Australia. Story 30. Survival of the fittest. The idea that nature is intense competition. Turns out animals cooperate for survival all the time. I am still blown away by those nature videos showing different species helping each other. That was not shown when I was a kid. Also, the explanation for animal variations being attracting mates or survival. Turns out, some animals just look funny, and there's no special evolutionary reason for it. Not everything has a grand purpose. Story 31. My 10th grade history teacher once said, terrorists never win because they unite people against them. But they apparently never considered that we could be united around something bad, like racism or jingoism. And what's worse is this wasn't even during peak hawk brain from 2001 to 2005. This was in 2012. Though I will say, this teacher also made sure we knew how terrible fascism is, and how you can never appease them. Story 32. I went to school in Boston Spa, birthplace of a guy named Abner Doubleday. The school liked to tell us he invented baseball. He didn't invent baseball. Neither he nor his family claimed he invented baseball. The story came out because the Baseball Hall of Fame wanted to figure out who invented baseball and somehow ended up with Doubleday. He was a Union general in the Civil War, involved in some major battles, and apparently had something to do with the cable car system in San Francisco. But all our school cared about was the baseball thing. Story 33. Nothing specific here, but I had a physical science teacher in 9th grade tell us at the beginning of the year, I will purposely tell you things that are incorrect and I expect you to question me, and then proceeded to never ever have that situation happen. Was never questioned. So I've always wondered, did he never tell us something wrong, or did he feed us bullshit and never correct himself because nobody asked? Story 34. No matter who you are, we all face the bar of justice. Justice is blind and everyone pays for their crimes. If you don't eliminate every microgram of fat possible from your diet, you'll get all the health issues and die from a heart attack before you're 50. Hard work and merit are always rewarded.